Hey guys, tonight we slip into the twilight of an empire where the air smells of dust and forgotten glory. You're standing on a cracked cobblestone street in Rome, 475 AD, the once mighty city, now a ghost of itself. The Colosseum looms, its arches chipped, vines creeping like whispers of neglect. Torches flicker, casting long shadows, and the Tiber River gurgles nearby, indifferent to the empire's pulse slowing. You can almost hear the distant clatter of a cart, maybe the last. Merchants stubborn enough to believe Rome's still worth trading with. Spoiler, you probably won't survive this city's chaos. Not as a Romang anyway, because the world you know is crumbling faster than a bad Tinder date. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and local time. I'm curious where you're drifting off from tonight. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're not just anywhere, you're in Rome at its breaking point. The Western Roman Empire, once sprawling from Britain to North Africa, is now a patchwork of desperation. Historians peg 476 AD as the official end, when Romulus Augustulus, a teenager barely old enough to grow a beard, loses the throne. But the decline? That's been brewing for centuries. You notice the signs, shops boarded up, aqueducts leaking, like a poorly plumbed sink, and soldiers who look more like they're auditioning for a low-budget cosplay than defending an empire. The mainstream fact here is that by the 470s, Rome's economy was a mess. Taxes couldn't fund the army. Trade routes were bandit playgrounds, and inflation made a loaf of bread cost a week's wages. Quirky tidbit? Some Romans still used crocodile-dung sunscreen, slathering it on like it was the key to eternal youth. Gross, but you respect the hustle. You keep walking, passing a temple to Jupiter, its marble streaked with grime. The city feels like it's holding its breath, waiting for the next blow. Historians still argue whether the empire fell from internal rot or external invasions, but as you dodge a pile of rubble, it's clear both were tag-teaming Rome like a wrestling match gone wrong. The air's heavy with smoke, not from grand sacrifices but from hearths burning what little wood's left. You spot a kid scrawling graffiti on a wall, some snarky jab about the emperor's latest tax hike. It's not exactly Banksy, but it makes you smirk. The people here know the end's near, even if they don't say it. You can feel it in the way they hurry past, eyes down, like they're avoiding fate itself. Your sandals scuff against the uneven stones as you head toward the Palatine Hill, where emperors once strutted. Now it's more like a haunted mansion than a seat of power. The guards at the gate look bored, their armor dented, probably dreaming of a farm in Gaul where life's simpler. You wonder what it's like to live in a city that's forgetting its own name. The markets, once buzzing with silk from China and spices from India, now hawk wilted greens and questionable meat. You're not eating that. Not unless you want a one-way ticket to food poisoning. The empire's borders are shrinking faster than your phone battery during a Netflix binge. And every day, another chunk of territory slips to barbarian tribes who don't care about Rome's legacy. As you pause by a crumbling fountain, you catch a glimpse of your reflection in the murky water. It's not just Rome fading, it's the idea of Rome, the Pax Romana, that golden age of peace and power, feels like a fairy tale now. You hear a distant shout, maybe a drunk senator or a street preacher, ranting about the gods abandoning them. You roll your eyes, typical Roman drama. But deep down you get it. This city, this empire, is on its last legs, and you're about to meet the kid who's stuck holding the crown when it all falls apart. His name's Romulus Augustulus, and trust me, his story's as quiet as it is tragic. Let's head toward Ravenna, where the real drama's brewing. You're trudging through the marshy outskirts of Ravenna, the Western Roman capital since Rome got too dicey. The air's damp, thick with the scent of brackish water and reeds. Ravenna's a fortress city, surrounded by swamps that make it a nightmare to invade. But you're not here for a vacation. You're heading to the imperial palace, where a kid barely 16 sits on a throne he never asked for. His name's Romulus Augustulus, and you're about to meet the boy emperor who's got the worst job in the empire. The path is muddy, your sandals squelching with every step, and you can't help but think Ravenna's a perfect metaphor for Rome. Stuck, soggy, and barely holding together, you reach the palace gates, guarded by soldiers who look like they'd rather be anywhere else. Inside, the halls are dim, lit by flickering oil lamps that cast shadows on mosaics of better days emperors in golden laurels, now peeling like cheap wallpaper. You spot Romulus, a lanky teenager with a mop of dark hair, sitting on a throne. Too big for him. His purple robe hangs loose, like he's playing dress-up in his dad's clothes. The mainstream fact is that Romulus was crowned in 475 AD, propped up by his father, Orestes, a Roman general who staged a coup to make his son emperor. Quirky tidbit? Romulus' name is a cruel irony named after Rome's mythical founder. Romulus and Augustus, its first emperor, but he's destined to be its last. Talk about pressure. You linger in the shadows, watching courtiers whisper behind their hands. Romulus fidgets, his eyes darting like he knows he's a puppet. Historians still argue whether he was a mere figurehead or had any real power, but you can see it in his slouch. He's got about as much control as a substitute teacher on the last day of school. You smirk, imagining him sneaking out to toss pebbles in the swamp instead of signing decrees. The court's a mess of egos, senators in faded togas, generals with rusty swords, and advisors who smell like they bathed in cheap wine. One of them, you swear, is wearing socks with sandals. Bold choice, buddy. You step closer, catching Romulus' eye for a moment. He looks tired, like he hasn't slept since the crown was plopped on his head. You can't blame him. The empire's falling apart faster than a knockoff chariot at a race. Beyond Ravenna's walls, barbarian tribes like the Visigoths and Vandals are carving up what's left of Rome's territories. Taxes aren't coming in. The army's more loyal to their paychecks than the emperor. And the Eastern Roman Empire, those fancy Byzantines, are too busy polishing their gold to help. You wonder if Romulus ever dreams of running away. Maybe. To a quiet farm where nobody expects him to save a dying empire. The air in the palace feels heavy, like everyone's waiting for the inevitable. You overhear a courtier muttering about Odoacer, a barbarian leader gaining power in Italy. His name hangs like a storm cloud, and you can tell Romulus knows it. You want to pat the kid on the shoulder, tell him it's not his fault, but you're just a ghost in this story. Instead, you notice a servant scurrying past with a tray of figs and bread, probably the fanciest meal Romulus will get today. You joke to yourself that if the empire falls, at least he's got snacks. But as you glance at the boy emperor, his fingers nervously twisting a ring, you feel the weight of his world. He's not ready for what's coming, and neither is Rome. You're trudging along a dusty road, far from Ravenna's soggy safety, where the Western Roman Empire's borders fray like an old toga. The sun dips low, painting the sky blood red, and you smell smoke, maybe a village burning in the distance. You're not in the heart of Rome anymore. You're at its edges, where barbarian tribes nibble away at what's left. The fields around you, once lush with Roman vineyards, are trampled, dotted with abandoned farmhouses. You kick a broken pot, its shards glinting in the fading light, and wonder how it all went so wrong. The empire's shrinking faster than your patience in a DMV line, and you're here to see why. The mainstream fact is that by 475 AD, the Western Roman Empire had lost most of its provinces, Britain, Gaul, Spain swallowed by tribes like the Visigoths, Vandals, and Franks. You spot a crumbling watchtower, its stones scavenged by locals for their barns. Quirky tidbit? Some Roman soldiers, desperate for cash, sold their armor to barbarians, who then used it to fight Rome. Talk about recycling gone wrong. You smirk, imagining a Visigoth strutting in a pilfered breastplate, probably thinking he's the coolest guy in the 5th century. Historians still argue whether these invasions were the empire's death knell, or just a symptom of its internal rot. But as you dodge a stray goat, you figure it's a bit of both. You keep moving, the road winding toward a river where a rickety bridge sways. Across it, you see shadows, maybe traders, maybe raiders. The empire's grip is slipping here. Local governors act like petty kings, hoarding what little gold's left. You hear a distant horn, sharp and urgent, and your heart skips. Is it a Roman patrol or a barbarian warband? You're not sticking around to find out. The air's thick with tension, like everyone knows the game's almost up. You pass a shrine to Mars. Its offerings meager, a few wilted flowers, no coins. Even the gods seem broke. Your boots crunch on gravel as you imagine the map of Rome shrinking. Britain's gone, left to Celtic warlords and Saxon raiders. Gaul's a mess, with Franks setting up shop like they own the place. Spain? Visigoths are throwing a party there, and Rome wasn't invited. You chuckle, thinking of the empire as a host who ran out of wine mid-feast. The legions, once unstoppable, are spread thin, underpaid, and half the time they're barbarians themselves, hired as mercenaries. You spot a lone soldier by the roadside, his shield dented, probably dreaming of deserting. You can't blame him. Loyalty to Rome doesn't buy bread anymore. As you crest a hill, you see a village below, its wooden palisade more hopeful than sturdy. Smoke rises from chimneys, but there's no laughter, no bustle, just wary eyes peering from doorways. You feel the weight of a world unraveling. Romulus Augustulus, back in Ravenna, might wear the crown, but out here, his name means nothing. The tribes aren't just knocking, they're kicking the door down. You wonder if that kid emperor even knows how bad it is, or if he's still playing with his toy chariots, hoping someone else will fix this mess. Spoiler, they won't. The empire's edges are gone, and the center's not far behind. You're standing on a windswept hill overlooking the Italian countryside, the air sharp with the scent of pine and distant campfires. The stars are out, but they don't feel like they're shining for Rome anymore. You're here to sense the growing shadow of Odoacer, a barbarian leader whose name is starting to echo louder than the emperor's. The fields below are dotted with the glow of tents, not Roman legions, but a ragtag army of Heruli, Siri, and other tribes, all following a man who's about to change history. You pull your cloak tighter, feeling the chill of a world shifting, and maybe a little dread. This guy's not just knocking on Rome's door, he's got the battering ram ready. The mainstream fact is that Odoacer, a Germanic chieftain, was a former Roman mercenary who rose to power in Italy by 475 AD, commanding a mixed force of barbarian troops. You can almost see him down there, tall, grizzled, probably sharpening his sword while his men roast something questionable over the fire. Quirky tidbit? Odoacer's name might mean wealthy spear, which is honestly the kind of branding you'd expect from a guy who's about to topple an empire. You smirk, imagining him handing out business cards with that title. Historians still argue whether Odoacer saw himself as Rome's conqueror, or just a guy taking advantage of a power vacuum. But as you watch the campfires multiply, you're betting on ambition. You creep closer, staying low behind a gnarled olive tree. The barbarian camp is alive with low voices, the clink of weapons, and the occasional laugh that cuts through the night. These aren't the wild savages Rome's propaganda paints. They're organized, confident, and well-armed, probably with gear they looted or bought from desperate Romans. You spot a warrior polishing a Roman helmet, a trophy from some forgotten skirmish. It's like seeing your ex's stuff in a pawn shop, kind of sad, but you get why it's there. Odoacer's men aren't here to negotiate. They're here to take what Rome can't hold. Your eyes drift to the horizon, where Ravenna's faint lights flicker. Romulus Augustulus is in there, probably clueless about the storm brewing. You wonder if he's heard the rumors about Odoacer, whispered in the palace like ghost stories. This barbarian leader isn't just a warlord. He's a symbol of Rome's failure to keep its promises. The empire used to buy loyalty from tribes like his with gold and land, but now the coffers are empty, and the deals are off. You chuckle, thinking of Rome's treasury like a bounced check. Sorry, Odoacer, we're fresh out of empire. His army's growing, fueled by deserters and locals who see which way the wind's blowing. As you turn back toward the road, a wolf howls in the distance, making you jump. Okay, maybe you're not as cool under pressure as you thought, but it's hard not to feel the tension. Odoacer's power is a tide rising, and Ravenna's walls, no matter how swampy, won't hold it back forever. You imagine the boy emperor, maybe staring out a palace window right now, wondering if he'll wake up to a crown or a sword. The night feels heavier, the stars colder, and you know this quiet hill is just the calm before the end. You're inside Ravenna's imperial palace now, the air thick with the musty scent of old tapestries and wax from sputtering lamps. The mosaic floor beneath your feet glints faintly, depicting gods and emperors who seem to mock the chaos around. You're navigating the court of Romulus Augustulus, a place less regal than it sounds like a high school drama club trying to stage a coup. Courtiers in threadbare togas whisper in corners, their eyes darting like they're expecting bad news any second. You can almost taste the tension, sour and heavy, as if everyone knows the empire's on borrowed time. Your sandals echo softly, and you wonder if anyone here believes they can still save Rome. The mainstream fact is that Ravenna, not Rome, became the Western Empire's capital in 402 AD because its swamps offered better defense against invaders. You glance at a window, the glass streaked with grime, and see the marshy haze outside nature's moat. But it's not enough. Quirky tidbit? The palace's cooks reportedly served peacock brains as a delicacy, which you imagine tasted like regret and bad decisions. You snicker, picturing a senator choking down that luxury while the empire crumbles. Historians still argue whether Romulus' court was a nest of schemers or just a bunch of has-beens clinging to faded glory. But as you weave through the crowd, it feels like both. You spot Romulus across the hall, slouched on his throne, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. His advisors, a mix of grizzled generals and oily bureaucrats, argue over maps that haven't been updated in years. One guy's pointing at Gaul like it's still Rome's dude. The Franks moved in ages ago. You roll your eyes, thinking this place is less imperial court and more dysfunctional family reunion. The air's thick with whispered plots. Someone's skimming tax money, another's cozying up to barbarian envoys. You overhear a name Odoacer slipping through the chatter like a ghost. Nobody says it loud, but it's there, haunting every decision. You sidle closer to a column, catching snippets of conversation. A senator's complaining about grain shortages, blaming everyone but himself. You want to tell him to try the peacock brains. Maybe it'll spark some ideas. The court's a mess of egos and desperation, with Romulus stuck in the middle. A kid surrounded by adults who treat him like a prop. You notice his mother, Barbaria, hovering nearby, her face tight with worry. She's probably the only one who cares if he makes it out of this alive. The rest? They're too busy saving their own skins or plotting to sell out to the highest bidder. As you slip past a guard who's half asleep, you feel the palace's fragility. The walls are strong, but the people inside are crumbling faster than that crocodile-dung sunscreen you heard about back in Rome. You imagine Romulus lying awake at night, hearing the same whispers you do, wondering if tomorrow's the day it all falls apart. The court's a stage, and he's the lead in a tragedy nobody bothered to rehearse. You're tempted to sneak him a note run, kid. It's not worth it, but history's already written, and you're just here to watch it unfold. You're still in Ravenna's palace, the air heavy with the scent of incense and desperation, like a cheap perfume trying to mask bad news. The mosaics under your feet shimmer faintly, but their glory feels like a taunt in this crumbling court. You're watching Romulus Augustulus, the boy emperor, slumped on his oversized throne, his purple robe looking more like a costume than a symbol of power. His eyes are tired, his fingers fidgeting with a gold ring, and you can tell he's carrying a crown heavier than anything you'd want to try on. The courtiers around him murmur, their voices a low hum of schemes and complaints, but none of them look at him like he's in charge. You're here to see what it's like to rule an empire that's already half dead. And spoiler, it's about as fun as a root canal. The mainstream fact is that Romulus Augustulus, crowned at 16 in 475 AD, was a puppet emperor, controlled by his father, Orestes, and other power-hungry elites. You glance at Orestes, standing nearby, his jaw tight, eyes scanning the room like he's waiting for a knife in the back. Quirky tidbit? Romulus' official title, Augustulus, means Little Augustus, a nickname that's basically the ancient equivalent of calling him Emperor Light. You smirk, imagining the court scribes giggling as they wrote that one down. Historians still argue whether Romulus had any real authority or was just a figurehead for his father's ambitions. But as you watch him shift uncomfortably, you're betting on the latter. You step closer, dodging a servant juggling a tray of overripe figs, probably the best this court can afford now. The atmosphere's thick with tension, like everyone's waiting for the other sandal to drop. Orestes barks orders at a general who looks like he'd rather be herding goats than defending Ravenna. You overhear talk of unpaid troops, empty treasuries, and barbarian envoys demanding more than Rome can give. It's like watching a startup crash after burning through its last investor's cash. You chuckle, thinking if Romulus had a LinkedIn, his job description would read, Emperor, but not really. You notice the boy emperor's gaze drift to a window where the marshy haze of Ravenna glows faintly under the moon. He's probably dreaming of escape, maybe to a villa where nobody expects him to fix an empire that's been broken for decades. You can't help but feel for him stuck in a role he didn't choose, surrounded by adults who use him like a chess. Peace. The court's a snake pit, with senators whispering about defecting to Odoacer, the barbarian leader whose name keeps creeping into every conversation. You imagine Romulus overhearing those whispers, wondering if he's the last one to know the game's over. As you lean against a pillar, the cold marble grounding you, you catch a glimpse of a faded fresco, some long-dead emperor, probably thinking he'd rule forever. You joke to yourself that Romulus could use a motivational poster. Hang in there, kid. But the truth is, his crown's a trap. The empire's crumbling under its own weight. Taxes don't come in. The army's half gone, and the Eastern Empire's too busy to care. You want to slip him a note, tell him to ditch the throne and run, but history's got other plans. The palace feels like a tomb, and Romulus is just waiting for the lid to close. You're still in Ravenna's palace, the air thick with the damp chill seeping through cracked windows, carrying the faint whiff of marsh mud. The torches flicker, casting jittery shadows on walls that once gleamed with imperial pride, but now feel like they're closing in. You're watching the Western Roman Empire's final administrative struggles, a bureaucratic mess that makes a DMV wait seem like a victory parade. Romulus Augustulus sits on his throne, a boy dwarfed by the weight of a dying system, his advisors bickering over scrolls that might as well be kindling. You lean against a column, feeling the cold marble, and wonder how anyone keeps this crumbling machine running. It's like trying to steer a chariot with no wheels, and you're here to see the last lap. The mainstream fact is that by 475 AD, the Western Roman Empire's administration was a hollow shell, with tax collection nearly collapsed and local governors acting like independent warlords. You spot a harried scribe juggling wax tablets, probably trying to balance books that haven't added up in years. Quirky tidbit. Some officials still used abacuses for calculations, clicking beads like they were solving the empire's problems instead of just counting their own doom. You smirk, imagining one of them proudly presenting a budget that's mostly IOUs to barbarians. Historians still argue whether Rome's collapse was due to this administrative chaos, or if it was just one cog in a broken machine. But as you watch the chaos unfold, you're leaning toward all of the above. You weave through the crowd, dodging a senator who's yelling about grain shipments that never arrived. The Empire's logistics are a nightmare, roads are crumbling. Trade routes are bandit territory, and the once mighty postal system is slower than a carrier pigeon with a hangover. You overhear talk of provinces like Gaul and Spain, now run by barbarian kings who don't bother sending taxes to Ravenna. It's like Rome's been ghosted by its own territories. You chuckle, picturing a Roman official sending an angry letter to the Visigoths, only to get a new king who dis. In reply, the treasury's so empty, you bet they're melting down old statues to pay the few soldiers still loyal. Your eyes drift to Romulus, who's staring at a map like it holds answers. Poor kid probably doesn't know Gaul's gone or that Britain's been off the grid for decades. His father, Orestes, hovers nearby, barking orders that nobody seems to follow. You notice a clerk scribbling furiously, maybe writing a decree that'll never leave this room. The Empire's bureaucracy, once a marvel of efficiency, is now a tangle of red tape and wishful thinking. You wonder if Romulus ever dreams of simpler days, maybe playing with that toy chariot you imagined back in the court's snake pit. The palace feels like a sinking ship, and these advisors are rearranging deck chairs as you slip past a guard who's more statue than soldier. You catch a whiff of stale wine from a nearby table, probably the only thing keeping this court from mutiny. The Empire's last gasp is all paperwork and no power, a machine grinding to a halt. You think of that crocodile-dung sunscreen from Rome's streets, wondering if these officials are slathering on denial to keep the truth at bay. Romulus looks up, his eyes meeting yours for a fleeting moment, and you see a kid who knows he's out of time. The Empire's not just fading, it's unraveling, and you're about to see who pulls the final thread. You're still lurking in the dim halls of Ravenna's palace, the air heavy with the scent of old wax and betrayal. The flickering lamps cast long shadows, making the courtiers' faces look like they're plotting something, or maybe that's just how they always look now. You're here to uncover the treachery among Rome's fading elites, a nest of vipers who'd sell their own togas for a chance to survive the Empire's collapse. The mosaic floor beneath you is cold, its once vibrant heroes faded, much like the loyalty in this room. You can almost hear the whispers of deceit, sharp as a dagger, and you're wondering who'll stab first. It's like a reality show, but with worse costumes and higher stakes. The mainstream fact is that in the 470s AD, many Roman elites facing a crumbling empire switched allegiances to barbarian leaders like Odoacer, hoping to secure their own wealth and safety. You spot a senator in a corner, his toga suspiciously pristine, muttering to a shifty-looking envoy. Quirky tidbit? Some nobles hoarded rare spices like saffron, trading them for favors with barbarian chiefs. Imagine bartering your grandma's secret recipe for a shot at survival. You smirk, picturing a Roman aristocrat haggling over peppercorns like it's Black Friday at a medieval Costco. Historians still argue whether these betrayals were pragmatic survival moves or outright cowardice. But as you watch the senator's nervous glance, you're betting on self-preservation. You glide closer, catching snippets of hushed deals. One official's promising land to a barbarian envoy, probably land he doesn't even control. Another's clutching a scroll, maybe a secret letter to Odoacer, offering Ravenna's keys for a cushy villa. You roll your eyes, typical elite move, jumping ship when the water's up to their necks. The palace feels like a chessboard where Everyone's playing their own game, and Romulus Augustulus, that poor kid on the throne, is just a pawn. You glance at him, slouched under his oversized crown, oblivious to the knives sharpening behind his back. It's like watching a lamb in a wolf den, and you're not sure whether to pity him or grab popcorn. Your sandals scuff against the floor as you pass a table littered with half-empty wine cups. Guess the elites are drowning their guilt. You overhear a general, his voice low, complaining about Orestes, Romulus' dad, who's been strong-arming everyone into loyalty. But loyalty's as scarce as that crocodile-dung sunscreen you laughed about in Rome's streets. You chuckle, imagining these traitors trying to explain their flip-flopping to their ancestors' ghosts. The court's a pressure cooker, and every whisper feels like steam escaping. You spot Barbaria, Romulus' mother, glaring at a senator like she knows he's up to no good. She's probably the only one still fighting for her son, but even she can't stop the tide. As you lean against a pillar, the cold stone grounding you, you feel the weight of a court unraveling. These elites aren't just betraying Romulus, they're betraying the idea of Rome itself. You wonder if the kid emperor senses it, if he hears the same whispers you do, or if he's still clinging to the hope that someone will fix this mess. The lamps flicker, casting a traitor's shadow across the wall, and you know the end's closer than anyone wants to admit. It's not just the empire falling, it's the trust that held it together, crumbling like the mosaics under your feet. You're standing on a dusty ridge overlooking the Italian plains, the late summer air thick with the scent of dry grass and distant smoke. The sun hangs low, painting the horizon gold, but there's no warmth in it, just a sense of something ending. You're here to follow Odoacer's barbarian army as it marches toward Ravenna, a slow, relentless tide that's about to wash away the last scraps of the Western Roman Empire. The ground vibrates faintly under your feet, not from earthquakes, but from the steady tramp of boots and hooves. You can see them now, a ragged line of warriors, heruli Siri, and others, their shields glinting, their banners flapping like vultures circling a dying beast. You pull your cloak tighter, feeling like you're watching the final act of a tragedy you can't stop. The mainstream fact is that in 476 AD, Odoacer led his barbarian coalition to Ravenna, capital of the Western Roman Empire, to depose Romulus Augustulus. You spot their campfires dotting the plain, each one a pinprick of defiance against Rome's fading light. Quirky tidbit: some of Odoacer's men carried amulets made from animal bones, believing they'd bring luck in battle. Guess they figured Rome's gods were on vacation. You smirk, imagining a warrior clutching a rabbit's foot while storming an empire. Historians still argue whether Odoacer's march was a calculated power grab, or just the inevitable result of Rome's weakness. But as you watch the army advance, you're thinking it's a mix of both opportunity meeting a crumbling door. Creep closer, staying low behind a gnarled tree. The warriors are a motley crew. Some wear looted Roman armor, others sport furs and crude helmets. Their voices carry gruff laughs, barked orders, the clink of swords being sharpened. You notice a scout riding back, his horse kicking up dust, probably reporting on Ravenna's defenses. The city's swamps might slow them down, but you've seen the palace's sorry state. Those walls won't hold back a determined toddler, let alone this lot. You chuckle, picturing Odoacer's men getting stuck in the mud, cursing their luck like it's a bad camping trip. But there's nothing clumsy about their purpose. They're here to end an empire, and they know it. Your eyes drift to the horizon, where Ravenna's faint outline shimmers like a mirage. Romulus Augustulus is in there, probably clutching that oversized crown you saw him wearing, unaware the clock's ticking louder than ever. You wonder if he's heard about Odoacer's march, if some panicked courtier broke the news between bites of those peacock brains you laughed about earlier. The barbarian leader's name is no longer a whisper, it's a shout, carried by every messenger sprinting through Italy. You imagine the panic in the palace, advisors scrambling like rats on a sinking ship, while Odoacer's men move closer, their steps steady, their confidence growing like a storm dot as you turn back to the road. A hawk circles overhead, its cry sharp in the quiet dusk. You jump a little. Okay, maybe you're not cut out for battlefield spying. But the sight of that army, disciplined and hungry, tells you everything you need to know. Odoacer's not just coming for Ravenna, he's coming for history. You think of that kid emperor, trapped in a palace full of traitors, and wonder if he senses the ground shaking under him. The march is slow, deliberate, but unstoppable, and you're about to see what happens when an empire runs out of room to run. You're inside Ravenna's palace again, the air stale with the scent of fear and dying torches. The mosaics under your feet seem to flicker in the dim light, as if the gods they depict are turning away from what's about to happen. You're standing in the throne room, where Romulus Augustulus, the boy emperor, faces the end of his reign. The room is quiet, save for the shuffle of nervous feet and the occasional cough from a courtier who'd rather be anywhere else. Outside, the marshes of Ravenna hum with insects, oblivious to the history unfolding. You're here to witness the throne's quiet fall, a moment that's less a battle and more a surrender, as gentle as a sigh, but heavy as stone. It's 476 AD, and you're watching an empire slip away like sand through your fingers. The mainstream. Fact is that on September 4th, 476 AD, Odoacer entered Ravenna and deposed Romulus Augustulus without a fight, marking the traditional end of the Western Roman Empire. You see Romulus, his face pale, his too big purple robe pooling around him like a puddle. Quirky tidbit? Odoacer didn't even bother killing him. Rumor has it he took one look at the kid and decided he wasn't worth the sword polish. You smirk, imagining Odoacer patting Romulus on the head like a disappointed uncle. Historians still argue whether this moment was the true fall of Rome, or just a formality in a long decline. But as you watch the scene unfold, it feels final, like the last page of a book nobody wants to close. You stand near the throne, close enough to see Romulus' hands tremble as he hands over the imperial insignia, a crown, a scepter, maybe that gold ring you noticed him fidgeting with earlier. Odoacer's there, towering, his barbarian armor clashing with the room's faded elegance. His men linger at the edges, their eyes sharp but calm, like they know they've already won. There's no bloodshed, no dramatic clash of swords, just a quiet exchange, a kid stepping down from a throne he never really owned. You chuckle softly, thinking it's like a CEO resigning from a company that's already bankrupt. Except the CEO's barely old enough to shave. The courtiers are silent, their faces a mix of relief and shame. You spot Orestes, Romulus' father, in the corner, his jaw tight, probably cursing himself for putting his son in this mess. You remember those whispers of betrayal from the palace's snake pit, and you wonder how many of these men sold out to Odoacer before he even walked in. The air feels heavy, not with violence but with inevitability, like everyone's been waiting for this moment since you first strolled Rome's crumbling streets. You want to tell Romulus it's okay, that nobody could have saved this sinking ship, but he's staring at the floor, his shoulders slumped, already halfway gone. As Odoacer speaks, his voice low, almost kind. You catch a glimpse of Ravenna's marshes through a window, their misty glow a reminder of the world moving on. The Empire's done, not with a bang but a whimper, and you're standing in the quiet heart of it. You think of that crocodile-dung sunscreen from Rome's markets, a silly relic of a city that thought it could last forever. Now it's just Romulus, handing over a legacy he barely understood, and you're left wondering what comes next for a boy who was emperor for less than a year. The throne room feels emptier than ever, and you know the story's not over, but the crown's already gathering dust. You're walking the quiet path away from Ravenna's palace, the marshy air clinging to your skin, thick with the scent of reeds and damp earth. The stars above are sharp, indifferent, as if they've already forgotten the empire that just slipped away. You're trailing Romulus Augustulus, no longer an emperor, now just a boy sent into exile. The crunch of gravel under your sandals feels louder than it should, like the world's holding its breath after Odoacer's bloodless takeover. You can still see the palace's faint glow behind you, but ahead lies a new chapter for Romulus, one of obscurity, not glory. It's like watching a movie star fade to a footnote, and you're here to see where the kid ends up. The mainstream fact is that after his deposition in 476 AD, Romulus Augustulus was exiled to a villa in Campania, possibly the Lucullan villa near Naples, with a pension from Odoacer. You imagine him now, trudging along a similar path, maybe with a small entourage, his mother, Barbaria, a few loyal servants, and not much else. Quirky tidbit? The villa might have had a private theater, where retired Roman elites watched plays. To pass the time, guess Romulus had to settle for reruns of his own short reign. You smirk, picturing him sprawled on a couch, munching figs and muttering, "I used to be emperor, you know." Historians still argue whether Odoacer's mercy was genuine kindness or a calculated move to avoid rebellion. But as you follow this lonely road, you're leaning toward pity. The path winds through olive groves, their leaves silver in the moonlight. You can almost see Romulus ahead, his shoulders hunched, no longer weighed down by that oversized crown you saw in Ravenna. The exile's not harsh by Roman standards, no chains, no dungeon, but it's a demotion from emperor to nobody, and that's gotta sting. You notice a cart rumbling past, probably carrying supplies to the villa, its driver giving you a wary glance. You chuckle, thinking he's wondering if you're another washed-up noble fleeing Ravenna's mess. The night's quiet, save for the hum of crickets, and you wonder if Romulus feels the same eerie calm, like the world's moved on without him. Your steps slow as you imagine the villa sprawling, but not exactly luxurious. The Lucullan villa, named after a famously decadent Roman, was more fortress than palace by now, its gardens overgrown, its fountains dry. Romulus probably spends his days wandering its halls, haunted by memories of that throne room you stood in, where he handed over his crown like a kid giving up a toy. You think of those peacock brains you laughed about in the palace, Bet he's down to plain bread now, no fancy delicacies. The pension Odoacer gave him sounds nice, but you're guessing it's barely enough to keep the villa's roof from leaking. As you crest a hill, the sea glints in the distance, a reminder of Campania's beauty. You want to tell Romulus to look up, to see the stars and forget the empire that chewed him up. But he's just a shadow ahead, a boy carrying a title that means nothing now. You feel the weight of his exile, not as chains but as silence. Kind that settles when history turns the page. The path stretches on, and you know this isn't the end of his story, but it's the start of a life where he's no longer Augustulus, just Romulus, fading into the dusk. You're wandering the streets of a post-imperial Ravenna, the air thick with the briny scent of the nearby marshes and the faint tang of smoke from hearths burning low. The city feels different now, quieter, as if it's catching its breath. After Romulus Augustulus' deposition, the stars overhead are dimmed by a thin haze, and the cobblestones under your sandals are slick with evening dew. You're here to roam a city adjusting to new rulers Odoacer's barbarian regime, which is swept in like a tide, reshaping Ravenna's pulse. The palace where you last saw Romulus hand over his crown looms in the distance, but it's no longer the heart of an empire. You're walking through a world learning to live without Rome, and it feels like a stage after the actors have left. The mainstream fact is that after 476 AD, Odoacer declared himself king of Italy, ruling from Ravenna and effectively ending the Western Roman Empire's political structure. You pass a market square, now half empty, where merchants hawk wilted greens and dented pots under the watchful eyes of barbarian guards. Quirky tidbit? Some locals still used Roman coins stamped with Romulus' face, passing them like souvenirs of a lost era. Talk about pocket-sized nostalgia. You smirk, imagining a vendor weighing one of those coins and muttering, "Worthless, but kinda cute." Historians still argue whether Odoacer's rule marked a sharp break from Rome or a gradual shift to a new order. But as you weave through the streets, you sense a city caught between both worlds. You pause by a tavern, its door ajar, spilling out the low hum of voices. Inside, locals and barbarian soldiers drink side by side, their laughter uneasy, like they're testing this new reality. You catch a glimpse of a Roman matron, her once fine stola patched, haggling with a fur-clad heruli over a sack of barley. It's not exactly the Pax Romana, but it's not chaos either, just life stumbling forward. You chuckle, thinking of those palace elites you saw scheming, probably now kissing up to Odoacer's men like they've always been Team Barbarian. The city's adapting, but it's a clumsy dance, like trying to waltz in flip-flops. Your steps take you past a crumbling basilica, its frescoes peeling, where a priest still chants prayers to a half-empty congregation. The old Roman gods are out of fashion, and Christianity's taken root, but even that feels uncertain under new management. You overhear a street vendor muttering about taxes, same old gripes, just a new king collecting them. You think of that crocodile-dung sunscreen from Rome's streets, wondering if anyone's still slathering it on, hoping to preserve something that's already gone. Ravenna's not burning, but it's not thriving either. It's just existing. A city learning to forget its imperial past. As you turn down a narrow alley, you spot a kid scratching graffiti on a wall. Maybe a crude sketch of Odoacer's crown. It's no masterpiece, but it makes you grin. Some things like snarky teens never change. The city's pulse is different now, slower, less certain, but it's still beating. You wonder if Romulus, off in his Campanian exile, ever thinks of Ravenna, or if he's already let it go. The streets feel like a ghost town trying to remember how to live, and you're just a shadow passing through, watching a new chapter begin where an empire used to be. You're drifting through the quiet fields of Campania now, far from Ravenna's marshy streets, the air warm with the scent of olive groves and sea salt. The moon hangs low, casting a silver glow over rolling hills, and you can hear the faint lap of waves from the nearby coast. You're here to ponder the legacy of Rome, a ghost of an empire that's left its fingerprints on the world, even as its last emperor, Romulus Augustulus, fades into exile. The grass under your feet is soft, almost inviting you to sit and reflect. But there's a weight to this moment, like you're sifting through the ashes of something vast. You're not just walking through history. You're trying to figure out what Rome left behind when it fell, and why it still matters. The mainstream fact is that the fall of the Western Roman Empire in 476 AD didn't erase Rome's influence. Its laws, language, and architecture shaped medieval Europe and beyond, from the Catholic Church to modern legal systems. You glance at a crumbling aqueduct in the distance, its arches still standing, a stubborn reminder of Roman engineering. Quirky tidbit? Some farmers in Campania still used Roman irrigation channels, swearing they worked better than anything new. Guess Rome's pipes had more staying power than its emperors. You smirk, imagining a farmer bragging about his vintage aqueduct like it's a fine wine. Historians still argue whether Rome's legacy was a foundation for progress or a shadow that stifled new ideas. But as you wander these fields, you feel its presence, heavy and undeniable. You pause by a stone wall, its blocks quarried centuries ago, and run your fingers over the weathered surface. Rome's roads, like the one that brought you here, still crisscross Europe, carrying merchants and pilgrims where legions once marched. You think of Latin, the empire's tongue, now echoing in church hymns and legal jargon. Even that crocodile-dung sunscreen you chuckled about in Rome streets has a cousin in the herbal remedies locals still brew. You wonder if Romulus, tucked away in his villa, ever thinks about this, how the empire he briefly ruled lives on in fragments, like a shattered mosaic pieced back together. You grin, picturing him trying to explain Roman law to a puzzled Campanian. Shepherd. Your steps take you toward the sea, where the horizon blurs into a misty haze. Rome's ideas, its senate, its aqueducts, its obsession with order still shape the world, even if nobody bows to an emperor anymore. You hear a distant bell, maybe from a monastery, a nod to the Christianity that took root in Rome's final days. It's strange to think that Odoacer, now king in Ravenna, is using Roman titles and coins to legitimize his rule. You chuckle, imagining him signing decrees with a flourish, like he's auditioning for Roman Emperor, the sequel. The legacy's not just in stone or words. It's in the way people still dream of empires, of something bigger than themselves. As you sit on a low hill, the grass cool beneath you, you feel Rome's echo in the quiet night. It's not gone, not really, just transformed, scattered like seeds across a new world. You wonder what Romulus would say if he could see this, if he'd feel proud or just tired. The stars above seem to whisper that Rome's story isn't over, even if its last emperor is. You're here, walking through its shadow, and it's time to ask what became of that boy who lost his crown. You're lingering in the moonlit gardens of a Campanian villa, the air soft with the scent of jasmine and the distant murmur of the sea. The stars above twinkle, casting a gentle glow on overgrown paths and cracked statues, remnants of a grander time. You're here to question what became of Romulus Augustulus, the boy who was once emperor, now just a shadow in exile. The villa may be the Lucalan, maybe not feels like a forgotten stage, its walls whispering stories nobody's left to hear. You brush past a vine-draped column, your sandals silent on the mossy stones, and wonder about the mysterious fate of a kid who carried Rome's last crown. It's like chasing a ghost through history's fog, and you're not sure if you'll find answers or just more questions. The mainstream fact is that after his deposition in 476 AD, Romulus Augustulus was sent to a villa in Campania with a pension. But historical records about his life afterward are scarce, leaving his fate uncertain. You imagine him somewhere nearby, maybe gazing out a window at the same stars you see, his face older now, etched with the weight of a title he no longer holds. Quirky tidbit? Some locals claimed Romulus became a monk, trading his purple robe for a scratchy tunic. Imagine the last emperor scrubbing monastery floors instead of signing decrees. You smirk, picturing him muttering, "I used to rule an empire, you know," while peeling turnips. Historians still argue whether Romulus lived a long, quiet life or faded quickly, perhaps dying young. But as you wander the villa's grounds, you feel the mystery hanging like mist. You step into a courtyard, where a dry fountain sits, its basin cracked, maybe the same one Romulus passed daily. The silence is heavy, broken only by the chirp of crickets, and you wonder what he did with his days. Did he read scrolls, dreaming of Rome's glory? Or did he stare at the sea, letting the empire slip from his mind like that crocodile-dung sunscreen you laughed about in Rome's markets? You notice a faded fresco on a wall, some mythic hero, half erased, and it feels like Romulus himself, a figure history's half forgotten. You chuckle, thinking if he did join a monastery, he probably prayed for better food than those peacock brains you heard about in Ravenna's palace. Your path leads to a terrace overlooking the Bay of Naples, its waters glinting under the moon. You lean against a balustrade, imagining Romulus here, maybe writing letters nobody answered or listening to servants gossip about Odoacer's new kingdom. The records stop short, leaving gaps you can only fill with guesses. Was he content, finding peace in this quiet exile? Or did he carry the empire's collapse like a stone in his chest? You want to find him, ask him how it felt to be the last. But history's stingy with details. You grin, joking to yourself that maybe he's still out there, a grumpy old man arguing with fishermen about Roman aqueducts. As you turn back toward the villa, the night feels softer, the stars a little kinder. Romulus' fate is a riddle, one you'll never fully solve, but it's part of what makes his story linger. You think of Ravenna, of Odoacer, of a world moving on, and you know the boy emperor's somewhere in this haze, a final whisper of Rome. The villa's shadows beckon, and you're ready to let his story drift into the mist of history. You're standing on the edge of that Campanian villa's terrace, the sea breeze carrying a faint saltiness that mingles with the scent of wild herbs. The moon is high now, its light softening the world below, blurring the lines between stone and shadow. You're here to reflect on the end of Rome, the final fading of an empire that once seemed eternal, and the boy, Romulus Augustulus, who was its last echo. The villa behind you feels empty, its halls quiet, as if even the ghosts have moved on. Your sandals brush against the mossy tiles, and you feel history settling around you like dust, gentle but final. It's time to let Rome drift into the mist, and you're ready to ease into that quiet farewell. The mainstream fact is that the fall of the Western Roman Empire in 476 AD marked a turning point, ushering in the Middle Ages, though its cultural and institutional legacy lingered in Europe for centuries. You gaze at the sea, its waves a soft rhythm, and think of Rome's roads and laws still shaping the world, like that stubborn aqueduct you saw in Campania's fields. Quirky tidbit? Some medieval monks kept Roman recipes alive, including a fishy sauce called garum. Imagine medieval potlucks with a whiff of ancient Rome. You smile, picturing a monk sniffing his stew and saying, "Needs more fish juice." Historians still argue whether 476 was a dramatic end or just a slow fade into a new era. But as you stand here, it feels like a whisper, not a shout. You lean against the balustrade, the stone cool under your hands, and let your thoughts wander. Romulus, wherever he is, maybe a monk, maybe just a quiet exile, carries the weight of an empire's end. But the world keeps turning. You think of Ravenna, its streets adjusting to Odoacer's rule, and Rome, its markets still clinging to that crocodile-dung sunscreen you laughed about so long ago. The empire is gone, but its echoes are everywhere, in the Latin prayers of churches, in the arches of crumbling aqueducts, in the stories you've been chasing. You chuckle softly, imagining Romulus hearing this tale and rolling his eyes like, "Yeah, I lived it, and it wasn't that poetic." The stars seem to soften, their light wrapping the villa in a gentle glow. You feel the night slowing, the air growing heavier, as if inviting you to rest. Rome's story, with all its glory and ruin, is slipping into the past, and you're ready to let it go. The sea murmurs, a lullaby older than empires, and you think of Romulus, maybe sleeping under these same stars, his crown a distant memory. You want to whisper to him, to say it's okay, that history will carry his name, even if it's just a footnote. The world's quieter now, the villa fading into the haze, and you're ready to drift with it. As you linger on this terrace, the night wraps you in its calm embrace, the sea's rhythm slowing your breath. The stars above blur gently, like candles burning low, their light a soft promise of rest. You let go of Rome, of Romulus, of the empire's weight, feeling it dissolve into the mist that rises from the waves. The villa's stones, once proud, now cradle you in their silence, whispering that all stories end, but sleep is kind. Your eyelids grow heavy, the world softening at its edges, and you sink into the warmth of the night, carried by the tide of history into a dream where empires fade, but peace remains. Let the sea's murmur guide you, let the stars hold you, and drift into a quiet, endless rest.